all they do is hit Trump, 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 Trump. When you go back and you take a look at it, all they do is hit Trump. They're licensed. They're not allowed to do that. Those were the president's exact words. Never once did President Donald Trump say, they can't criticize me. That's a lie. This is exactly what Trump meant, in my opinion. What he meant is that these hosts, creators, public figures, these shows have standards. So when you're licensed, you are required to produce original material. And what Trump is saying, they're licensed, they're not allowed to do that. He's saying they're not allowed to keep recycling the same topic. The president doesn't care if you criticize him. If that were the case, he would censor criticism on his social media app, Truth Social. All of these lies and left-wing extremist propaganda are doing is furthering the gap between the right and the left. This propaganda is instilling fear into people. That's immoral and wrong. Above all, this doesn't unite America. It's even scarier that people are so demoralized and brainwashed that when information is put in front of them, they cannot draw conclusions. So if they're told, oh, the president said you can't criticize him, even with the evidence right in front of them that the president did not say that, they still believe it because they're brainwashed. Who's brainwashing these people? Our foreign adversaries, Russia and China. Russia and China are manipulating the media to turn Americans against their government, which will bring us into a crisis if we don't come to clarity very soon. Because right now, what's abundantly clear isn't clear for Americans. All Americans can do right now is react to stimuli. React, react, react. The information is in front of them and they react, react, react. They don't draw conclusions. This is active measures. This demoralization and brainwashing is dangerous in our country. It's destabilizing our country. It will bring our country into a crisis, and it will affect our democracy. Because as the years go on, as so many people eat this shit up and become more and more against the government, against the country, the more dangerous it gets. As that's happening, pillars that hold our country together are crumbling. You know better than to believe that lie. I know better than to believe that lie. Anyone with their own independent, sovereign thought would listen to the president as he says, all they do is hit Trump. But if you go back and you take a look, all they do is hit Trump. They are licensed. They can't do that. I know this from personal experience because I'm a creator. I can't produce the same recycled content over and over. I'll get a violation. I'll literally lose monetization. The same applies for hosts who have to follow guidelines in their licensed agreement in their show. Now, was Jimmy Kimmel's joke about Mr. Charlie Kirk and his family and the president in poor taste? Yes. Was Jimmy Kimmel arrested and sent to jail and provided with an appearance ticket for making that joke? No. Was his show terminated? Yeah. Did he produce his own show? No, ABC did. That's owned by Disney. I'm sure Jimmy Kimmel can produce his own show. He's very successful. And there you go. He won't get arrested. Nobody's getting arrested. It's almost like people can't watch things and develop their own conclusions because all they know to do now is react to information, and that is very dangerous. Quit making up lies. These media outlets who are making out lies on social media are seriously our foreign adversaries that are undermining America by causing turbulence inside through our own society. This is demoralization, and it's dangerous. And the fact that so many people are going to get angry at me for telling the truth, it's the perfect example of a public figure, a leader, a United States president. Any example where they say one thing, social media and news outlets skew it, and people don't draw their own conclusions. That is dangerous. The reason it's dangerous is because it spreads like wildfire and people believe it by the millions. A society can only thrive for so long with so many million and millions of people fear-mongering. As they're fear-mongering, they lack the ability to draw sensible conclusions. They only know how to react. This is so dangerous. There's literally a news article about this. There was an interview about this. An interview took place in 1984. A former KGB officer defected to Canada in 1970 and held an interview in 1984 predicting modern America. What he said in that interview is happening right now. And if you want me to read you that interview, I will. The interview is on YouTube. I've never watched it. I prefer to read. Radicalized left-wingers, radicalized right-wingers all have the same things in common. They do not trust the government. They are turning against the government. Extreme right is fear-mongering that their guns are going to be taken away. Extreme left is fear-mongering that their freedom is being taken away. Their freedom of speech. And the extreme right, our freedom of speech is being taken away. Don't you see? You're all reacting to the same thing the exact same way. It's no coincidence that hundreds of millions of people are unable to draw conclusions and they're only able to react. Wake up. I'm very quickly going to read you this interview because it's happening right now, especially with liberals. 39 years ago, a KGB defector chillingly predicted modern America. I'm going to put all the screenshots here, the highlights. You can pause and read. This is a disturbing interview that took place in 1984. We'll call him Yuri. That's his first name, Yuri. He said, Russia has a long-term goal of ideologically subverting the U.S. It's a process described as a great brainwashing with 4 basic stages. Demoralization is the first stage that could take about 20 years. And I'm going to start off right here. Across the world, KGB did whatever they could to thwart pro-Western and anti-Soviet political movements and figures. I'm going to scroll down and just read you the highlights. When he gave the interview, much can be learned from today, his most chilling point was there's a long-term plan in play from Russia to defeat America through psychological warfare and demoralization. It's a long game that takes decades to achieve, but may already be bearing fruit. He made the point that the work of the KGB does not involve espionage, despite what our popular culture tells us. 85% of it is a slow process, which we either call ideological subversion, active measures, or psychological warfare. So what does that mean? He explains, the most striking thing about ideological subversion is that it happens in the open, as a legitimate process. You can see it with your eyes. The American media would be able to see it if it just focused on it. Here's how he further defined ideological subversion. What it basically means is to change the perception of reality of every American to such an extent that despite the abundance of information, no one is able to come to sensible conclusions in the interest of defending themselves, their family, their community, or their country. He described it as a great brainwashing that has 4 basic stages. The first stage is demoralization that takes up to 20 years. According to the former KGB agent, this is the minimum number of years it takes to re-educate one generation of students that is normally exposed to the ideology of its country. In other words, the time it takes to change what the people are thinking. He used the examples of the 1960s hippies coming to positions of power in the 80s, in the government and businesses of America. He claimed the generation was contaminated by Marxist-Leninist views. Of course, this claim that many baby boomers are now somehow espousing KGB-tainted ideas is hard to believe. He has a larger point that he addressed why people who have been gradually demoralized are unable to understand that this has happened to them. He said they're programmed to think and react to stimuli in a certain pattern. You cannot change their mind even if you expose them to authentic information. Even if you prove white is white, black is black, you still cannot change the basic perception and logic of their behavior. Demoralization is a process that is irreversible. He actually thought that the process of demoralizing America had already been completed back in 1984. It would take another generation and another couple decades to get the people to think differently and return to their patriotic American values, claimed the agent. This is why so many people are against America. In what is perhaps the most striking passage in the interview, he said, as I mentioned before, exposure to true information doesn't matter anymore. A person who is demoralized is unable to access true information. The facts tell him nothing. Even if I shower him with information, authentic proof, with documents and pictures, even if I take him by force to the Soviet Union and show him a concentration camp, he will refuse to believe it until he receives a kick on his fan bottom. When a military boot crashes his balls, then he'll finally understand. But not before that. That's the tragedy of the situation of demoralization, and it's not hard to see that in the state of many modern Americans. We have become a society of polarized tribes, with some people flat out rejecting facts in favor of narratives and opinions. Once demoralization is completed, the second stage of ideological brainwashing is destabilization. During this 2 to 5 year period, asserted Bezmenov, that's the man, what matters is the targeting of essential structural elements of a nation, their economy, foreign relations, and defense systems. Basically, the subverter Russia would look to destabilize every one of those areas in the United States, considerably weakening it. The third stage is crisis. It would only take up to 6 weeks to send a country into crisis. The crisis would bring a violent change of power, structure, and economy, and will be followed by the last stage, normalization, when your country is basically taken over, living under a new ideology and reality. This will happen to America unless it gets rid of people who bring it to a crisis. What's more is if people fail to grasp the impending danger of that development, nothing can ever help the United States. You may kiss your freedom goodbye. It bears saying that when he made these statements, he was warning about baby boomers and Democrats of the time. In another somewhat terrifying excerpt, here's what he had to say about what's really happening in the United States. The United States people may think it's living in peace, but it has been actively at war with Russia, and for some time. Most of the American politicians, media, and educational systems train another generation of people who think they're living at the peacetime false. The United States is in a state of war, undeclared total war against the basic principles and foundations of this system. Please read this interview and think twice before you allow the media to manipulate you, your emotions, the emotional whiplash. Stop taking narratives and opinions to face value. You're bringing yourself terror. You're bringing yourself fear. None of that is happening. And when you spread it, you cause people to become fearful around you. And this spreads like wildfire on social media. It's dangerous.